Good day, class. Welcome back to week 2. All right. Hopefully everything went well in week 1, and you had an enjoyable class experience thus far. So make sure that you guys get your LEs in. There are a few that haven't been completed, so make sure you get that in, even if it's going to be late. Some points are better than none, so get that in as soon as possible. For those that did get their LEs in on time, good work. I appreciate the effort. Saw some good posts that I really liked. They were very informative and also good perspective on, how sports and, kind of the management of sports and that kind of thing, has an impact and understanding confidence in athletes and making sure that, organizationally speaking, that the management of sports is not an easy endeavor. Okay, so appreciate you guys also sharing your experiences and providing your insight. All right, with that said, this week we're going to run into managing and leading in sports organizations. Okay, and some other topics. Okay, and to doing real leadership, having to do with more of the details of the management process, which is the general process that we have in business for managing anything, really. Okay, or the planning process, as we like to call it. All right, so let's get into this. All right, so theoretically speaking, there are some approaches that we use in the leadership field that really apply to management, right, in a practical sense, right? There's a scientific management approach, there's a human relations approach, and a process management approach, right? And each one of these have, their different components and pros and cons, right? Scientific management approach is really about the science of management, right? This fix the details, more of the quantitative analysis side and how that's applied in the workspace, understanding that, a job may take a precise, amount of things to get done, like a two-pound hammer or a 4-pound bucket or a piece of equipment that's necessary, to get the job done. But there's a scientific approach, there's a methodical approach to how the job is completed or how management, operates or manages the workforce, right? It's very detailed and making sure that, hey, we have this down to a science, and so that anybody can be plugged in to complete the task, right? Because we have a book and the formula says do A, B, C, and D, and that's how kind of it goes along those lines, right? Then we have the human relations management approach, which is really about more influence and personality and charisma and that kind of thing, right? Getting in and building relationships with people, not necessarily off the technical aspect, but more of a personal relationship and getting them to do things that you want them to do. You want them to perform in a certain way, but it has nothing to do really with their skill set. In many instances, it's more about the relationship that you're forming with them, and that you believe in them, and that you value them as a person. And so that gives them the encouragement, that gives them the acknowledgement and the self-esteem that they need to do the task that they are supposed to be doing, right? Then you have a process management approach, kind of similar to scientific, but more, what we call transactional, management, where there's, there is a process to how things are done, right? And so it's a recipe. And so the recipe is given, but sometimes, there's things within there that you can change up. You have to be, more variable in how you do stuff. This, situational leadership kind of falls in this particular, in the process management approach, where we look at what's going on and then we set a certain, certain set of parameters or a certain set of approaches to it based on the circumstances that we have at hand, right? So there's a couple of different ways, to approach management. It all depends on the personality of the leader and, how how they see their resources and how they view themselves as far as what role they want to play. All right. Some functions of management, okay, are really planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, and evaluating, okay? These are the basic management functions, all right? You always want to have a plan, right? You have to get stuff together. You have to coordinate, right? That's comes to organizing piece. The staffing, I need the personnel, right? The directing really leads to, hey, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And kind of giving them rudder steer, like go left, go right, go straight. This is good. This is not, right? Controlling is the same thing, but controlling is more of a general, in a general sense, where I have control over the entire thing, or responsibility over the entire thing. At the end of the day, the decisions, final decisions are mine, right? As the leader, right? And I have my evaluation aspect where I look at what we've done and, is it where I want it to be as far as quality, quantity, all the specifics of the project, does it meet the customers, requirements and that kind of thing, right? So you always have an evaluation function, kind of evaluation / feedback. You want to put that back into the process, right? The planning process, so that you can refine your management and your processes for a better product, better outcome. All right. So as you can tell, it's just a visual depiction of functions of management: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, and evaluating. Right. And it's a process. Excuse me. It's a pretty straightforward process, but needs to be done in steps. Right. You can always go back to a different aspect of it, but you always start with planning. Right. You don't necessarily do anything without having a plan. All right. You don't move forward without organizing and coordinating your resources, right? Staffing, such and such, right? And so forth and so on. So, this is just the basics of, management and business, and how most corporations, most entities, how they approach the planning process and how they come to figure out what their objectives are and how do we get to those objectives. Okay. All right. So there's a table 4.1 kind of outlines, some of the steps of a GM in a sports organization, right? Outlines different managerial functions and explains examples of sports managers, how and what they practice, right? So you can take a look at that in the book and check that out. But, depending on, what type of GM you are for which type of team or which type of sport, I should say, will vary, right? There's just different levels. GMs in general are always trying to make sure that they get the best possible talent and build a cohesive team, right? That's really what we're looking at. You don't always have necessarily, all your players or all your athletes are not always superstars, right? But if you get the right pieces and people understand their role, and you have a couple of, different type of profile, personalities as far as leaders, those that are experienced but are seen as informal leaders, right? Those that are young and bring the energy to the team, those that are, support roles, okay? And people understand their roles and they play their positions and play their roles. You'll find that teams can be very successful and effective if they understand who they are as individuals and what they can contribute to the team, right? And that becomes really the mantra of successful teams, right? It's a team. It's not individual sport. It's it's I. So you do have individual sports, of course, like tennis and golf and those kind of sports, right? And that's a little different when there's really no GM per se, right? But they do have managers and they do have people, coaches and that kind of thing that help them, figure things out and get them to be better athletes. Right. So different type of managers, right? Top level managers, middle level, supervisory level managers. Okay. And so it's really just bottom, middle, top, right? And really when you look at the different level managers, it's really down to number of people that they're managing and the scope of their responsibilities and authority. Okay. The higher you go, The more people you have, the bigger your budget, the more your responsibility and scope, the bigger the impact of your decisions. Okay. They reverberate a little different at the supervisory level than they do at the, at the top level manager, as they do at the supervisory level. Okay. So you got to keep an eye on, how things, what level you're at and what it is that what piece of the pie do you have as far as like the organization goes. Right. Managerial skills, you got, conceptual, human relations, technical. Okay. And table 4.3 shows managers to links to levels of management. Okay. So when you talk about managerial skills, you're really just looking at, what does this person bring to the table? What do you bring to the table, right? And so as a manager, you have to understand the concept and what's going on. What is it that we're aiming for? Or what's our goal here, okay? And then be able to interact with people, right? The people on your team, but you have to have the understanding, right, of what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, when people present things to you, you really can't say whether they're right or wrong, or if there's a better way to do it, or if this is exceptional work. You have no idea, right? So as a manager, you have to have all three kind of the elements that, you have to have the big picture, right? The conceptual picture. You have to be able to relay that and communicate that to your staff and team. So you have to build these relationships with other people, even though they work for you. You have to build it in such a way to where the people respect you, because they understand that you know your stuff, but they also understand that you're going to let them, handle their business, and show you what they can do, right? And you understand the technical aspect so that if things, start going to the left or right, you can intervene and fix those things, right? You can intervene and provide guidance and advice. That's really what you're there for as a manager, is to, manage the resources, okay? But at the same time, you want to try to stick some development in there. You want to try to tutor and mentor and teach if you can, right? That's a leader, okay? That's a true sign of a leader, right? The ability to develop you people to the point where, at some point they will surpass you, right? If you stay in your same position, those folks may surpass you, maybe not in that organization you're in, but in another organization. So, being a manager, you have to not only, be technically savvy, but you have to have some aspect of understanding of relationships with other people and understand the bigger picture, not only um, from your own department or section perspective, but from the organizational perspective. All right, so some parallels and differences in roles of managers, right? So there's different, ways that people look at leadership. Are leaders born or are they made? Okay. And so that's been an ongoing debate from the beginning of time. And really the answer is no one really knows, okay, to tell you the truth, all right? You see some folks, they just naturally have an ability. And then you see some other folks who over time become great leaders, right? From experience and going through certain things, okay? They develop a keen sense of leadership. They understand people. But others, may go through the same experience, may go through the same thing, and not necessarily come out as great leaders. Okay, so you can't really, um, say leaders are born or leaders are made. It's just because we have both perspectives, and both perspectives have proven to be effective, right? And so there's really, it's been a debate, and it will continue to be a debate, because there's really no definitive research out there that supports either one to be better or another. Okay. 4.5, table 4.5 kind of lays out some of the characters of successful servant leader. Okay, so when we talk about servant leader, this is kind of the new, not new, but it's a catchphrase for kind of like the epitome of the a good leader, right? Because as a leader, you really are, as someone who has people working for them, you really are a servant to those people. Okay, now you might not think about it that way, but you really are, you working for those people that work for you. Okay, if that makes any sense. All right. So yes, you're there to manage the folks, but that's about it, right? You're going to give them what they need, finish or complete the task that you've asked them to complete, right? And so this is where the servant piece comes in, where you understand, like, okay, I'm here for these folks because these folks are trying to get done what I've asked them to do, right? And so, some of the correct characteristics that you're looking for in a servant leader, they have to be empathetic. They should listen, right? They should have some foresight. They should be trying to connect people and build a community and, build a team, build a family, sort of, right? Where out of work, inside the office space and outside the office space, we get along. And usually those are the best kind of teams where you can spend time with your coworkers outside of the workplace. Okay. You get some really great results because we're forming a bond that goes past our work, our professional, day-to-day stuff. Right. So, you know, you start to build these really, really strong relationships, these strong connections, and they, kind of lead into, the workplace where we have a strong relationship outside of work, we have a strong relationship in work, we work better, and we're more open and trusting to others. And so we're more open and trusting to different ideas and listening to, what other people have to say and think. And so it definitely helps. All right, the contingency theory of leadership. Okay, so I see contingency theory. It really is about the outcome, or sort of like what's going on, right? Kind of situational leadership. Okay, so when we have kind of like the leaders follows in the context, right? So we look at the leaders and who they are and how they lead, and then we look at the followers and who they are and how they follow and what they bring to the table and with the situation, right? What is going on? Like what are the circumstances? Because in every situation, you may have to switch up your leadership style. Okay, you may have a core way of leading, but in different scenarios, you have to maybe lead differently, right? In an emergency situation, the leader is different than they are in a situation where nothing's going on, just a day-to-day regular type activities going on. And so you have to be able to flex on that, right? And if you can't flex as a leader, right, and you can't really address the situation at hand, right, then you're gonna have some problems because you have to be able to be reactive and proactive, okay, as a leader, right? You have to understand who your followers are and what assets and what they bring to the table in every situation, right? An emergency situation, some people freeze up, they lock up, and they don't do well. Others come to the top, or rise to the top, and they're ready to take the lead, and they're ready to kind of take that lap, okay, or make that last throw, or kick that last penalty kick, whatever it is, right? They like the pressure, right? And you have to understand as the leader that that is an asset that you need to leverage, right? And see, okay, who do I want with the final decision? Who do I want making that, executing that final goal, or taking that last shot at the buzzer, right? So you have to understand that, there's different types of, ways to approach, situations. And really it's about, your leadership style, but again, being able to flex, based on the contingency theory of leadership is really important, okay? Looking at some other aspects of the contingency theory, right? Organizational complexity, leader follower interaction, and level of task uncertainty, right? And so all these things I kind of mentioned before already, right? So organization and how, the hierarchy is set up, right? Do I have to, talk to 3 different people to make a decision about something, right? How, do, I get along with the people that work for me, right? Is there, or do we communicate well? Do they respect me, right? Again, and then, the task uncertainty, right? How much ambiguity is there in what I'm doing, right? How sure am I in this particular approach and the outcome of this approach? Mm-hmm. All right, so leadership styles, right? They really are based on traits, behaviors, or situations. Okay, you have, the trait leadership style, which basically goes to that most people have. I'm sorry, I didn't even put it. Most people have, traits that maybe, are just or demonstrate a leader, and then others, have traits that you can see that okay are not necessarily that of a leader, maybe that of a manager, maybe that more of a follower, right? But then you look at your behaviors, right? And that leadership style. Okay, I'm going to behave, or I'm going to lead by example, is what behaviors kind of like. Okay, so if I lead by example, my behavior, the things I do, people will see that and say, oh, you know what, the boss did this, so I'm going to do what the boss said, right? Or how the boss did it. Or I'm gonna, the boss, sacrificed or made, a tough ethical decision that, benefited the team and not himself or herself, then you see these behaviors, right? So the team will emulate or will take on those particular behaviors, right? And every situation, as I said before, kind of falls under the contingency theory aspect of leadership, but you have your situations, right? And then you look at the situation and then trying to figure out, okay, what leadership style do I use, right? But it's based on the situation, based on the, what's the scenario at hand. Like I said, sometimes it's an emergency situation. Leaders are not the same that handle, natural disasters as compared to leaders that, handle just regular day-to-day stuff, right? Let's take, for instance, the case of Darvin Hamlin, the NFL player who was, had a heart attack or cardiac arrest, I should say, on the football field last week, right? That was an emergency situation, right? But you already see that the organization was prepared, okay? The leaders knew what to do. They had all the medical, resources available. They took the proper procedure and they saved his life. And now he's recovering, pretty decently, better than what most thought. And so that was a thing that was really predicated on the situation. Okay. Because, at that point, the coaches, the general manager, those folks are no longer relevant, right? And they have to understand that we are no longer relevant. The owner of the teams no longer relevant, right? And so their leadership style is to, okay, I see the situation. This is not my lane. I need to defer to the experts within that particular lane, right? And let them lead, let them do their thing, right? But they step back and let the medical professionals do their thing, because at that point, now they're the leaders, okay? They are the ones taking over based on the situation. All right, so you got your four range leadership models, okay? Transactional leadership, non-transactional, and transformational, right? Transactional leadership really just speaks to having a process and having step-by-step, procedures on how to, lead, okay? And you're looking more for, data-driven, processes as far as, how you lead, okay? Non-transient leadership, laissez-faire is really, relating to, kind of hands-off approach, right? I don't care how you get it done, just get it done, okay? Sort of. I don't really care, if you come into work at 5 and you leave at 9, right? As long as you have your job done and everything's good to go, I really don't care, right? The transformation leadership is more about relationships, right? As we talked about earlier, it's about forming that bond with people and getting them to do things based off your influence, right? And based off your charisma and based off your relationship with them, and making them feel valued and appreciated. They will definitely go above and beyond to make sure that they don't disappoint you. All right. All right. So visual depiction of multi-level approach to leadership. Okay. And again, you can take different, styles, put them together, right? and, try to figure out what is the best way in which to handle the situation. Okay. You have the individual level antecedents to leadership. Okay. Darker traits, moral identity, live experience, sports participation. Right. And so when you look at the live experience or the individual level, what is that person's experience? What do they to the table as far as their own, I don't want to say baggage, but what they've been through. Okay. That's the first thing. Then you have to look at the leadership process itself, okay, and look at the organization of the folks that are involved, right? And kind of the other things, right? So you have your fans and alumni, your governance structure, right? Coaches and athletes, again, and then you have your stereotypes and your organizational culture, and then all that kind of feeds into how you lead, right? And so you have the fans, you have the organizational structure you have to deal with, you have the stereotypes that come with your particular industry or you as a coach, right? And you have the culture itself, the organization, right? Is what kind of culture are you forming? What kind of culture are you a part of? And that all kind of leads into kind of different outcomes, okay? Leads to different approaches, okay? And trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way for me to do what I need to do successfully and at time bring all my folks with me and develop them, get to the goal, and everybody attain what it is they're trying to attain, right? And it's a very hard and difficult thing because you can see it's not easy to win a championship in any sport, okay? It's difficult no matter which way you slice it, right? This is why it's such a big deal, because it's very difficult to be one or be the ultimate champion at the end of the day, because there's so many facets, there's so many elements, there's so many people involved, different personalities, and so it makes it difficult. Okay. So steps in decision making, right? And this is just to make decision making process, right? Defining and framing the problem, identifying criteria, developing value alternatives, selecting an alternative, implementing an alternative, evaluating the effectiveness of the decision. All right. Back here. All right. So let's talk about this real quick. Okay. So defining and framing the problem, you have to know the problem before you can try to solve it. Right. It doesn't make any sense to try to come up with a solution when you really haven't properly analyzed the problem and gotten to the elements, right? You may see the symptoms, but we're really looking for the root cause, right? We're not looking for the symptoms, right? And so many times people are fooled by the symptoms thinking that they know what the problem about doing the proper analysis, and they end up formulating a solution that addresses symptoms and not the problems. And then that, again, doesn't work because that problem will occur in some different, form because it's the same problem that you deny, right? Just in the symptoms is not going to work, right? The criteria for decision, right? What are my thresholds? What are my parameters? What is it I'm trying to achieve, right? That will set me the criteria. I'm trying to get to above 500. I want, two of my players to be selected for the all-star teams, or, I'm trying to rebuild the team from scratch and I want, certain things. So what is your criteria, right? Developing, evaluating alternatives, you got to come with multiple plans, right? Come with multiple, approaches, not just one, and then kind of lay all your, put your eggs in one basket and roll with it, right? You have to be able to come up with different options, compare and contrast those options, look at the pros and cons, and then you pick one, right? You pick your options and trying to see, okay, what's going to work, right? Then you implement your different options and kind of see which one you think is going to work the best, and then you choose that one and you put it, and then you look at, okay, did it work out? That option alternative that we chose wasn't the best one. Could we have done something better, or can we go back to the drawing board and fix those things? Okay. All right. Power, of course, the ability to influence others, control over resources. And this is you know, what, you know, leaders have, right? Power. As a manager, as a leader, you have power, right? But there's a distinction between power and authority, okay? The power really the ability to influence others, right? And you're controlling resources, okay? But authority is about decision making, okay? It's about, you know, who can necessarily say, you know, we're going to go left, we're going to go right, you know, this is the finest, the buck stops here, right? Be able to decide on the budget and that kind of thing is one thing, but at the end of the day, the, you know, the ultimate authority, the person that says, yes, this is a good budget, or no, it's not a good budget, that's really, you know, the difference between the two, right? Difference of power, okay? Legitimate positional power, that goes with, you know, someone who's a coach or, you know, the head manager or the team lead, right? Or something, team captain and that kind of thing, right? That is legitimate or positional power. That is recognized by everyone as someone has some power there, right? Reward power is basically, you know, the power that comes from the ability to provide people with, you know, not compensation, but some reward for their actions. Okay, I'm kind of in charge, or I have the gate. I'm the gatekeeper to, you know, reward. Right, the way I wield my power is through, you know, action, results. You get a reward. Okay. So that type of power is a little different because, you know, it's not always authentic. It's not always, let's say, real. Neither is legitimate or positional power, because people will, of course, defer to you because of your position, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they respect you. Okay. Reward power is the same thing. Coercive power, is with darker, right? Where you kind of, you know, making people do things because you're the boss and you're going to, you know, kind of put a little pressure on them and leverage the boss thing and kind of make it more of, I'm telling you what to do. And it's sort of twisting their arm, okay? Referent power really speaks to me, you know, having a high level of respect or garnering a high level of respect. And so kind of like, you know, Michael Jordan has referent power, right? It's Michael Jordan. Oh my goodness. All right. I'm going to do whatever he says because he's been there. Kobe, you know, Bryant had reverent power, right? LeBron James has reverent power where he's, you know, revered, you know, because of what he's done and his, you know, his skill set and that kind of thing, right? Messi, you know, those kind of guys, you know, as athletes have referent power. And so, you know, that is also something that you have in the corporate environment or the you know, the management aspect of it, right? A referent power, someone who, you know, you look up to sort of and will do whatever they say because you respect them and you revere them for what they've done and what they bring to the table, right? Expert power really is about your knowledge, right? This person knows everything, and so I'm going to just, you know, go with what they say because they know, right? It's kind of like going to talk to a cardiologist or orthopedic surgeon. You really got no choice but to, you know, really follow what they say because you don't have an expert power. You don't, they have the expert power. They're the experts. They know what they're doing. So when it comes to joints and ligaments and, you know, tendons and you know, those kind of things, then they're the ones that are, you know, are the experts. Okay. So same thing in the management aspect of things. Okay. The expert power is someone who's, you know, the CFO or the COO or, you know, those positions carry a lot of different powers. Okay. Legitimate power, reward power, they all carry sort of all the power, really. Expert power, maybe not so much because the CEO isn't always the expert in many aspects of things. And the higher you go, the more, you know, it becomes about legitimate and positional power and coercive power, right? Expert power, in my opinion, kind of stays at the lower level, you know, or middle, lower level, because that's really where the rubber meets the road, where things are being executed as far as what's the plan and who's actually executing those things and who knows, what's going on, right? Who knows how to actually the ins and outs and the details of certain things, right? So that's extra power. And then of course, information, because information is always power. Whoever holds the information holds the power, okay? And so sometimes you'll find that certain people know things that other people don't, right? Or they'll say, this only need to know basis, something that effect, right? Information is definitely power. And if you have the information, you more than likely have a lot of power because you know what's going on, you know what's happened, and you know what's going to happen, right? That really what it boils down to, right? Then you have diversity, right? We want, a diverse workforce, okay? Now, there's definitely some disadvantages for having a diverse workforce, but it really just deal with some of the, poor behavior of people within a diverse workforce, right? The, kind of the bullying and creating a hostile work environment. Because having a diverse environment or having a diverse organization is an advantage, okay? Usually lends itself to being a positive thing, and it provides a wider range of perspectives and approaches and thoughts, because people are coming from varied backgrounds, and they have different ideas on things because of the way they were raised, or their value system, or their moral system, right? And so that kind of contributes to having better ideas, or more having more better ideas to pick. Okay, hopefully I said that in a way that made sense. All right, and you want to try to build a good organizational culture of diversity. You want to build acceptance. You want to build camaraderie, regardless of race, religion, color, creed, gender, right, sexual orientation. And none of that stuff really matters, okay, at the end of the day, especially in sports, okay? Because, athletes come in all shapes, sizes, looks. So you definitely want to build as diverse organization as you can, because you may be missing out on great talent if you are just predisposed to aligning yourself with African Americans should just play basketball, or Hispanics and Latinos and should just play baseball, and Caucasians should just play hockey. So you kind of get where I'm going, where you want to have the sport as diverse as possible, because the diversity then leads into more of a global impact, right? A global, emphasis, where now different countries, different nationalities are now looking at the sport when they didn't look at it before. And now it becomes something, more of an opportunity for the team, right? An opportunity for the individuals to go out and, expose themselves and be a part of the world, right? And contribute to the world and show the world their greatness, okay? So now we're talking about, still, some strategies here for embracing diversity in the sport workspace, right? You got to be proactive, right? You got to plan, organize, evaluate your tasks, and community inclusivity, right? So basically, you have to, be proactive in the sense that you have to create programs, you have to create activities, you have to do things that bring the community in, right? But also include everyone in the community, right? And then go to different communities and showcase, what you have, right? Just don't stay within your surroundings and then expect, just to cater to those people, because people are coming from everywhere to these sporting events, right? These sporting activities. And so your goal as a leader is to go out there and get as far wide a reach as you can, right? And I always think of, Commissioner David Stern, who is now passed and deceased, but his vision for the NBA was that of a global sport, right? because the NBA really had been a domestic endeavor, right? And was doing well, domestically, around the world, basketball was being played, but, the NBA was not, the league that was seen as a global league, right? It was just seen as an American, league, although it had the best players in the world, because, we dominate the sport, but at the same time, internationally, everyone else was seen as, kind of second rate, when it came to, their leagues. And now the NBA has now, branched out because of David Stern, and now Commissioner Adam Silver has branched out into different areas, and trying to, build diversity, by, going to Africa, by going to China, by going to Europe, and, playing games there, trying to build the NBA brand. And then eventually, what would more than likely happen is that the NBA would become a global endeavor, right? And each country would have a certain amount of teams, it'd be NBA, Italy, or NBA Europe, or something to that effect, right? And then NBA Africa. And each of those particular countries would have teams. They'd play, intra-country games, and then at the end it'd be an inter-country game, right? It'd be the NBA championships would be the best African team, the best Italian team, the best US team, the best, the Australian team, whatever the case may be, right? That's how it kind of would look like. Okay. All right. So some keys to support inclusive diversity. All right. Presence of change teams. All right. Education, talent support, and systematic integration. Right. So when we talk about presence of change teams, we're talking about teams that represent the change you want to see. Okay. Teams that illustrate the power of diversity, right? What I mean by that is that you have teams that have, international players, have white players, have black players, have Hispanic players, have Asian players, and you see a team like that, and you think, oh my goodness, like that's a great team, and it's, we have something like that. Let's use that as a formula to, kind of build other teams to that degree. But of course, it's always based on talent, right? If you don't have the talent to make it at the highest levels, then that's fine. You just, play at the level that you can. But at the same time, right, everything's about talent. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is talented people, right? Regardless of where you're from, it doesn't matter. And that's really what we're looking at, right? Education is included in that, right? Being able to, learn and figure out, other nationalities and other value systems, right? Support at the, for management, okay? And then just slowly just kind of building those things into the system, right? Not necessarily trying to stuff it all at once. Just, okay, this year we're gonna do, a couple of international games, right? Okay, then we're gonna do some grassroots camps in some other places, with the teenagers and the youth, right? And then next thing we'll do a women's clinic over here, right? And then slowly you start to integrate these things over a period of time, and then it becomes the norm, right? And then people start asking, okay, well, how do I get, to where, we can make this a bigger thing, right? And hence, you see, a lot of the women's leagues have sprung up, okay? Football, American soccer, that's a big deal, right? On the women's side, especially, we also have the WNBA, right? That's something that took time to build, right? But it's also a diverse, diversity aspect, because now we have a league that is, strictly, for women, okay? And, there's always a question about integrating the sport, right? Or integrating the genders, having men and female and women play on the same teams. And it boils down to a level of athleticism, excuse me, and just the fact that men just happen to be naturally just bigger and stronger, but doesn't mean they're better. Okay. But just the physicality of it makes it sometimes difficult to put those things together, depending on the sport, right? Tennis does a great job of, having, mixed doubles teams, right? And so they're one of the sports that have put the two together and have women and men playing on the same team and playing against each other. Basketball, sometimes depending on what's going on, we kind of put the two, genders together, but at the professional levels, at the high levels, the serious levels, they're separated. Okay. Football, definitely male. We have had, some people kind of venture off into creating leagues for women for football. They've taken some hold, but not as much, as we like. So again, there's room for improvement and growth. And so it just takes time to kind of get those things going. Okay. You're talking about critical thinking in sports managing and leading, right? We look at diversity and hiring the NFL. But as a leader, as a manager in any sports team, you have to think critically. You have to think outside the box. You have to think about what's the best thing for your organization, and you have to do it in an ethical and moral way, right? You can't just, pick people because of, nepotism or because of, similarity to yourself, right? So, there's the whole aspect of this person looks like me, so I'm more comfortable or can relate better with them because they come from the same place, or at least I'm assuming they come from the same place or understand the same things I'm going through because of our physical similarities. Okay. And that's not always the case, right? And so you have to act ethically in the sports world, right? And ethical leaders, try to be honest, caring, and principled in their behavior, right? And so people will pick up on that, right? If you have fair dealings and people know you to be, stern or strict but fair, they'll deal with you. They understand because they understand where you're coming from, right? And they know that you have the best intentions. And really, at the end of the day, that's really what people are looking for. They're looking just for a fair shot. No one's looking for a handout. No one's looking to, take advantage of, the situation. People are really looking to just get a fair opportunity, right? And that's all you can ask for, because it doesn't matter, where you're from, what school you went to. None of that matters. If you're talented and you're good at what you do, you always are going to shine, right? You're always going to stand out, right? It doesn't matter. And so, you have to behave in an ethical way as a leader, right? To make sure that people understand that your main objective is about getting the best talent and building a cohesive and productive team. Okay. So let's look at some of the sociological aspects of sports, right? Sports in general are, a really big thing in our society, okay? When you look at sports, you can, in many instances, look at or correlate it to life in general and how people behave in life and, how people are viewed in life and look at different people's behaviors, and kind of like trying to figure out, okay, what does sports do for our society? Okay, what does sports provide to us as a whole? Okay, and if you look at it, sports sociologists, that's what they look at. They examine the impact of sports on our lives, the economic impact it has, excuse me, what sports does for us as a community, as far as bonding, whether the relationship is good or bad. Sometimes you have toxic relationships in sports. Our society has, some people are very loyal to their team and almost to a fault. But at the same time, sports is a very commonplace and popular thing in our society, period, right? Doesn't matter what country, globally speaking, sports has always had a definite impact, okay? So some of the benefits of sports, of course, are, a socializing agent and a unifier. And what we mean by socializing agent is that it allows people to, be able to talk about or share something in common, okay? To where they feel, they can socialize with someone else and others, and and have the ability to be comfortable with that, right? Be comfortable with others because they're talking about sports, right? And so that opens up a bridge or gateway for folks, right? And then unifier, it really just brings people together, okay? People have the same common goals, they have the same common objectives, they're rooting for the same teams and that kind of thing, right? And so that builds a unifying effect so everybody comes together, no matter where they're from, what they do. At that moment, we are team Chelsea. We're team, USA, we're team, Jordan, whatever it is, right? We come together regardless of whatever our differences are in other aspects, okay? You have the dark side of sports, of course, right? Sexism, homophobia, racism, right? Runs rampant, okay? So sports can also divide, as I mentioned before, right? Because if you have someone who is, committed to their team and no other team, matters, and it's the mentality of, if you're not with us, you're against us, this is where you have a problem, okay? And we all have to remember that the sports are just that. It's sports, they're fun, they're leisure. It's, it's not necessary for life, right? And so these are games that we're playing, okay? And so you have to weigh that in the context of other things and start to take a step back and not get sucked into the sport. It's so much that you don't really, you can't separate, the sport from anything else in your life, okay? Sports should not drive your life. It should be something that you enjoy and participate in, but at the same time, understand that, that sport or that skill set that that person brings to the table or whatever it is doesn't characterize them, doesn't define them as a person, right? Because there's many aspects to a person, right? So avoiding sexism in sport, right? Not exploiting, the opposite gender, right? In sports, okay? Homophobia, heterosexism in sport, not worried about people's sexual orientation and, exploiting that, or, being hypersexual in sports and, having, certain, leagues like the lingerie league, which is, female football team, where they're dressed and they're playing in lingerie. That's kind of like what, we're looking at when the sexualizing the sport, okay? People come not necessarily for the talent, they just come from, just look at women in scantily clad outfits. So different perspectives on that, but it, definitely something to think about, right? And then racism in sport, we definitely see that across the board in most sports, if not all, right? Especially we had a problem with, soccer or football, right? With racism and those African American players or players of darker skin tone, um, experiencing racism, while they're playing and getting bananas thrown at them and certain other, racial or prejudicial, things, right? Things that symbolize, racism. It's a noose, that say, symbolizes the hanging of slaves. Back in the day, bananas. Again, racism should not be something that should be in sports, okay? But it is. And at the end of the day, it's really a lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. Sexism in sports, as I said before, women in power in positions of leadership in sport, right? female patterns of sports participation, and trying to look at, how not to, prohibit or stifle, an athlete because of their gender. Okay. And we're trying to make sure that we, increase the participation of women in sports, and respect their talent and skill that they bring, in addition to also trying to increase the representation within the leadership, right, into the executive and management levels of sports. Okay. So let's look at this. All right. So when we look at women in positions of power in the NCAA, right, we look at graduate assistants. There's a huge amount of graduate assistants, assistant coaches, 50%. Okay. 46% associate, head coaches, 42%, athletic directors are 13%. So, just don't seem like bad numbers till you get to the athletic director. Might need a little uptick in trying to, get those numbers up, but it makes sense, in the sense of that, most college women's team are typically, nowadays anyway, typically coached by female athletes, right? Or female coaches. It wasn't that way before, right? Women's teams were coached by males, predominantly. And then that's changed over the past 10, 15, 20 years where, the coaches are now, women. And we have it to where, even on the men's side, there are women, female coaches, right? You look at the NBA, there are female coaches, assistant coaches, associate coaches, that, are in charge, right? And helping the men. But again, the reason they're in those positions is because those women are respected for their skill sets. Okay. Those women are respected and are revered because they were great at what they did, right? Regardless of their gender, they were great basketball players. They were great soccer players. They were great, hockey players. They were great baseball players, tennis players, whatever the case may be, right? That's really what, it should boil down to, right? And so we have to get that parity in there and start to build up these particular situations. You can see as you start to get into the positions that are more, can be, either or, more or less, right? It starts to lean more towards, the numbers get slimmer and slimmer, right? Where the head coach is now, predominantly men, right? Because we have 42% here, 58% men, and 13.6 of ADs are women, which leaves us with what? 77% are male, right? And so you start to get in these positions where gender could be either or, right? More, you start to lean more towards the male. And so we want to get that more balanced, right? The head coaches are catching up, but again, that's because there are just as many men's teams as in equivalent women's teams, right? Athletic director is not that way. There's one AD. And so there's one AD, then we see that there's a huge disparity in, women to men, right? But again, this is all anecdotal, and it's just me looking at the numbers, right, that we've been presented here, okay? And some real research would need to be done to kind of lay that kind of out here. And well, it's the numbers here have been researched and are from a research study, right? What I'm more referring to is the aspect of athletic directors not, be able to build more women within their ranks. Okay. Homophobia and heterosexism, we kind of talked about that already, so I'm not going to really delve into that too much. All right. Racism in sport, also, I talked about that a little bit, right? Both categories, when it comes to homophobia and racism, again, I truly believe it's just a lack of knowledge and in education, and just a matter of fact of lack of exposure also, right? The more time we spend with someone who is different than us, the more we understand them, the more we are open to accept them for who they are, because we realize that they're good people and they're just like us. There's really no difference. They just they just live differently in certain parts of their lives, but it's parts of their lives that's really personal and individual and has nothing to do with us, right? And so it's really, understanding that, right? And then racism, of course, same thing. It's just lack of knowledge. So, sports definitely can serve as a catalyst for change, because people come together, when we're talking about sports, right? People, can see different, aspects of individuals based on sports, and understanding that, again, we are the same, and that, we just want a fair shot. We want fair and equal treatment. We don't want to be, excluded because of our race, color, creed, gender, or religion. Okay. We don't want that, right? And so there have been a few instances, as outlined on the slide, where we've had people that have used their platform for some kind of social change. Okay. And some have, not suffered, but definitely lost a lot of, money doing it, a lot of, stature, and have been, blacklisted. Others have, gone out there and done well and represented, but also have, people have been trying to stymie them. And, Megan Rapinoe is a good example, right? Making sure that, women get paid fairly and treated equally within the ranks of the soccer, right? Or football, right? That they receive comparable compensation as compared to, the male teams, right? And that's still an ongoing fight, but that's a fight that is not only relevant in the sports world, but relevant in corporate America in general, right? Women do not get paid the same as men, right? For every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 75 cents, right? And that's an increase from what we had before, right? So there's definitely places or ways in which, sports can serve as a platform, for social justice, social transformation, bringing people together, right? It all depends on the person and their influence within, our society, right? Because sports figures are looked upon and revered individuals, and they have a huge impact on, how, our youth, see themselves, how the youth think, right? Because the youth want to be like them, in a sports and skill sense, but they don't really know the person, right? And this is where you get to know the person. What does the person stand for as an athlete, as an individual, right? What is their moral compass and their value system like? Okay. And if you see, athletes standing up for social causes, right? That says a lot about them, right? If you look at the case of someone like Muhammad Ali, or, even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jackie Robinson, to go back a little bit even further, right? All those people that are very iconic and are known to be activists. Bill Russell, those folks have always, been socially active and used their platform for social justice, right? The civil rights movement, and making sure, fair, equitable treatment for everyone, regardless of, race, right? All right. So looking at social media and, and those socializing aspects, right? And understanding that as an athlete, as someone in an organization that, is, a sports organization in our day and age, social media, has to be thought about very carefully, right? We just can't post stuff there, put stuff there out there in social media like a normal person would, okay? Because you're not normal. Um, you're part of an organization and that has a high profile. And the minute you put something out there, people are automatically going to associate the organization with what you said, right? So there has to be really good thinking, critical thinking, foresight, understanding of the impact of social media and what cannot be said on social media, right? Critical thinking, of course, all right? We're talking about Title IX and, the ability of women to, participate in sports, right? And then just ethics in sports, okay? Specifically, we had the battle or the conversation about, using Native American sports mascots. It used to be the Washington Redskins. Now they're Washington Commanders. We have the Atlanta Braves. They haven't changed their name yet, but there's always a point of contention, right? The Florida State Seminoles, all of that is not necessarily derogatory, but at the same time, it may be offensive to that particular group. And so if it's offensive to that particular group, then it's probably something that we want to look at. Kansas City Chiefs, all those things, right? You kind of have to, take a step back and be sensitive to, another culture's desires and needs and how they, and sensitivities. All right, so let's look at the organization of some sports companies, okay? So when we look at, how, we look at, our organizations, right? And again, a sports company is the same as any other company, okay? We're trying to, achieve economies of scales and economies of scope, right? We're trying, in the end of the day, we're trying to maximize our resources in the attainment of our goals, right? And make money, okay? So there's a couple of things going on, right? Because everybody has different objectives, right? Organizational objectives are not necessarily the same or not aligned with the athlete's objectives, the management objective, the staff objective, the endorsers objectives, the marketing. There's different things going on here, right? And so we have to kind of look at it. But when we look at the transformation process or, how we achieve goals, right? It's the same across the board, right? There's input, there's a transformation process, what you call the black box, or what, that thing that is going to take effect on our inputs, and then we have our outputs or our outcome, right? Different types of organization, okay? We have public, nonprofit, and commercial, all right? Each one does something different, okay? We have an organization environment, kind of looking at, different environmental categories, general, specific, okay, or task, right? We talk about specific, we're talking about where you have specific goals, right? Specific things that you need to do. And that's how you kind of set up your organization, right? Where, okay, yes, we have a general objective, right? But these are the tasks that we need to accomplish to get to those things, right? What are the roles of the stakeholders or the people that are vested into the organization, right? The people that have, really risked a large amount of money or time or sweat equity, whatever the case may be, right? There's people that really have an impact and understanding of what's going on, okay? And there's this general environmental elements, right? Again, these apply to any organization, right? When we look at a SWOT, right? Strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, or SWOT-E, strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, and then external environment, right? We have to look at the economy. We have to look at the technology that's present. We have to look at the geopolitical, socioeconomic aspects, right? Politics in general. We have to look at the social and cultural forces, right? What is our country going through? What are the, some of the social issues we're dealing with, right? What are some of the demographic things that we're going through, right? As far as like who's the majority, who's not the majority. The majority, folks, it's this particular race or this particular religion or this majority of folks or this particular percent of the population has degrees or doesn't have degrees or has played sports, or, right? There's different things that you look at when you're trying to, understand the environment, okay? Questions asked about the elements of the specific environment, right? Who are your consumers and what are their purposes? Same thing I just said before. Who are the suppliers? Who are your competitors and what role does government play in the environment, okay? And so again, these are all looking at the external environment, right? Not only looking at your consumer and looking at your target market, right? But you have to understand what they want, what are you going to get, where are you going to go to get what they want, right? Who are the other people vying for them same, consumers, right? And what, impact will the government or will, rules and governance have on the environment, right? What kind of legislation is going to come down that's going to affect how I do business, right? Is Congress going to come down with a specific rule about helmets? Is Congress going to say, hey, you guys can't keep having concussions, and not do anything about it. You need to, formalize a process that addresses concussions for football players, right? And so those things have to be taken into consideration. What kind of tax implications am I going to have if I'm a team, a certain type of team, right? Or where I'm located, right? All those things, right? When we look at organizational effectiveness, right? We look at, effectiveness, efficiency, right? And making sure that we get to where we're going, but how we do it matters also, right? And being able to, keep costs down, right? Which increases revenue, right? Which increases profit, okay? There's only two ways to make more money. Either you make more money or you decrease cost, okay? That's it, right? And so that speaks to your effectiveness and your efficiency, right? And then you look at, trying to figure out how effective are we, right? Again, going back to the planning process, going back to the management process of evaluating and feedback, right? You evaluate, you see what, can be done better, you put it back into the system and you revise it to make it a better process, okay? The strategy, right? How do you plan to cope with environment, right? Steps in development of plans, organizational processes involved in developing a strategy to gain the competitive advantage, right? Again, what's your approach, right? What are your tasks? What's your roadmap for, dealing with the environment, right? The external forces, right? What's your development plans, right? Player development, staff development, management development, right? How are we going to just develop the organization in general, okay? Because the more we develop the organization and the better we get at it, the more competitive advantage we have, right? As far as like being ahead of our competitors, being ahead of the market, being ahead of everyone else around us, right? Because that generally leads to championship. That usually leads to, being the ultimate, final victor, in sports, right? Development of partnerships and alliances, right? Motives for creation of organizational partnerships, showing that, of the ability to reach out and talk to other teams, talk to other managers, right? You need that because there's a lot of trade sometimes that go on, right? In all aspects of sports, right? You need to have those really good relationships and working partnerships to say, hey, I want this player, you want that player, what can we do, right? Or you want a couple of things here, or you want a couple of draft picks, or hey, I'll give you money and you can reuse your, facilities to practice, when we're here, can we share facilities, right? Just like, the Los Angeles Chargers and the LA Rams were doing for a while, right? They were sharing a stadium, right? And now I'm pretty sure, or maybe not, they may still be sharing a stadium, but that comes from partnerships, that comes from alliances, that comes from talking and having relationships with each other and trying to figure out how do we maximize our resources, okay? Organization strategy plans, right? Identify the goals, objectives, and the mission of the organization, right? Determine strategic objectives, identify required resources, and establish a timeline, identify milestones, right? All this stuff is all within the planning process, okay? when you look at your strategic approach, right, the first thing is identify goals, right? What's the problem? You have to identify the problem, right? And then that will give you the goal, right? What are the objectives? What are the tasks that we have to do to get to those particular goals, right? So the sub, kind of sub things, okay? The mission of the organization, right? Overall, what is the overarching, thing we're trying to get to, right? What's my vision? What's my mission? What is it we're trying to get to, okay? You have to be able to identify your resources. What do I need to make all this stuff happen? Do I need 10 coaches, 5 coaches? Do I need, X player with this X, this Y skill, right? Do I need a certain amount of money? Do I need this particular field? Do I need this contract? Or do I need to go talk to a city official or even a federal official to get a certain type of permit or approval for something, right? And then you have to have timelines, right? To hold people accountable to, do things in a timely manner, right? Not just to be able to sit around and not, you just take that time and doing stuff, right? Because everything is time sensitive, right? Time is money. Time is one of those things where no one can control. We don't have, an unlimited, infinite supply of it, right? And it matters, right? And you don't want to waste people's time, right? And so you need to establish timelines and milestones so that okay, I've achieved certain goals or haven't achieved certain goals and I've elapsed this much time. And how do I fix that or how do I continue on to that path? Okay. Organizational culture absolutely is important. Okay. And making sure that, you create the culture that you want to create, right? Now, when it comes to organizational culture, we always want to have a positive, accommodating, inclusive environment, okay? Understanding that there's different and diverse backgrounds within our organization and making sure that we acknowledge that and that we have things that, represent those particular cultures and ethnicities and the diversity within our organization, okay? And so, having, certain observances of certain religious rites, having certain memorabilia around and, doing things a certain way that honors a particular ethnicity or race or background or heritage, okay? All right, so this time, going to, end the presentation. Make sure you go in and look at chapters 3, 4, and 5, I believe. Just, go over, re-review some of the stuff. Make sure you get your learning engagement done. And also make sure you get the quiz knocked out. Keep an eye on, the project and deliverable, the paper that is due. And understand there's also the case study that you have to get going on, right? And so I hope you've, taken the time to establish your groups. If not, by next week, if nothing's been established, I will establish groups for you. But I would really like for you guys to get in there and kind of do this on your own. All right. Okay. With that said, if you have any questions or comments, please, reach out to me via email. If it's time sensitive, text me and I'll get back to you.